the person with the most information usually wins.
Yeah.
And so when I was a land broker, I can't tell you how many times in the first year I would walk in and show a property and I remember Butch McCaslin going, "Where's the sewer?" I don't know.
Yeah.
He goes, "What size the water line?" I don't know. Man, I left there feeling like a heel. And he was just asking normal, good questions.
Right.
And I should have known the answer, but I wasn't smart enough to know that.
Yep.
So I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And another thing is do what you say you're going to do, and then admit if you don't know it. So many times people try to fudge it. Right. Well, the water's, you got enough water.
Yep.
Well, just say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you.
Don't be afraid to say, I don't know.
But follow it up with, I'll get back to you. Yeah. And then do.
That's right.
And so the other thing is so many times I've failed, but I've developed a really good client when I work extra hard to overcome the failure. And they're like, nothing's going to stop this guy.
Scott Rohrman, how we doing today?
I'm better than I deserve.
Attaboy, I like that.
Yeah, thanks for having me out.
Well, I appreciate you coming, especially on a Friday afternoon. That's pretty impressive. Most brokers, right, by 2:00, they're out the door.
Well, I know, and this weekend, especially Monday's an off day, so the parking lots were pretty empty.
They were. Me and you got together a few years ago. I think Joni Margotto put us together.
She did,
and we've kind of stayed in touch and talked to each other from time to time. But I think the first thing I want to do is congratulate you on the Hall of Fame induction into the NASCAR Hall of Fame a couple weeks ago.
Nice of you to mention it. It's quite an honor, that's for sure.
How did it come about? Did they come to the office and tell you, or how does that process?
Yeah, so my good friend Lynn Dowdle, we've done a few deals together, and she called me and said, "Hey, I've got something I want to show you." I'm like, "Well, tell me what it is, and we'll see if I'm interested." She says, No, I have to show you. I'm like, okay, so come on over. And so she came over and she sat down and she was talking about the weather and the sports. I'm like, where's the deal? And what she was doing was getting me in the conference room so that when Chris Teasdale and Mike Friedman and Jack Gosnell and the other gals came in, that I was there. Right. So I was like, when they walked in, I'm like, oh my gosh, did I forget to pay a commission or what? 'Cause all these high-powered brokers are walking in my office. Like, what'd I do wrong?
Right.
So
that's great. Well, congrats on that. And another cool thing that's happened recently, you brought in a good friend, a friend of both of ours, Stephen Hawley, onto the team. That's another big deal.
So technically, he's starting Hawley Development Company.
Okay.
And we're entering into a joint venture at the same time that he is starting Hawley Development Company. So he's got his own company, but we're entering into a joint venture deal right up front.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, and I tell a lot of people, he's just one of the best humans I've ever met. I mean, just such a great guy.
Well, it's really nice of you to say. I think the same about him. We've known each other for 20 years, and really, really appreciate it. We started Carry the Load together with Clint Bruce, and it was so it's been a nice long
for sure
relationship.
Well, I'm excited for him, and I think it's a great opportunity for you guys to kind of be joining forces together. And he's certainly a hustler, and he's learned a ton about the industrial space over the last 5-6 years or so that he's been in it.
Right. He's learned a lot in a hurry,
has.
And he really has a good understanding of it. And he's a Navy SEAL, and I guess they teach him how to be a heat-seeking missile because he is that. So.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, that's exciting. Before we dive into all things commercial real estate, Scott, I'd love to learn more about you and kind of your upbringing a little bit and how that shaped you to be who you are today. If you tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Happy to. My father was a Baptist preacher, and pastored numerous churches.
Okay.
And I went to 11 schools in 12 years.
Oh, my goodness.
And that would have been about 7 or 8 different cities. One year I was in the same city, and I went to 3 schools in 1 year in the same city. It was Jackson, Mississippi, and it was the racial in the 70s and all the racial conflict and so forth. So I was in one school, and then the judge shut the schools down and redistricted and then bused us. And I was going to be on a bus for 55 minutes one direction.
Wow.
And my parents were like, my dad integrated First Baptist Church of Jackson, and it was the guy who, God did it, but used my dad to allow any person of any race to worship there, whereas before it was white only.
Right.
So it wasn't a racial thing for us, but they just didn't want me on a bus for 55 minutes one way.
Yeah.
So I went to another school. It had to be private because I had to, had to have choice. But so 1 year is 3. But I went in high school. I lived in 3 different cities, so I was constantly having to learn how to.
Boy, you were having to learn how to make friends.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I mean,
and most years I made at least one. It feels like there's at least 1 year where I sat at the lunchroom by myself a lot. But
man, that's tough.
Yeah,
moving that much.
I started first grade at 5, so I was always a year to a year and a half younger than sometimes 2 years younger than most everybody. So it was hard in high school dating when everybody else was asking girls out and driving a car, and I had to get my parents to pick us up. So
I was like you. I was the young kid in the class.
Yeah.
I was born in June, so I was so envious of all those guys born in August and September were driving cars, and I had to wait a whole another year.
I was born in September, but they pushed me forward.
Wow.
Yeah. So
yeah. So all around Mississippi growing up.
Yeah, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did you want to be when you were a kid?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know that I remember it too much, but in high school, I thought I wanted to be in radio, television, TV.
Okay.
And I really wanted to be I didn't want to be on camera. I wanted to be behind the scenes and do the production and maybe direct or whatever. And
all right.
Got to Baylor and went into the journalism, radio, TV department. And that's when Playboy was doing the girls of the Big Ten, girls of the Southwest Conference.
Yeah, sure.
And Baylor was like, if a girl that goes to Baylor is in the Playboy, we're going to kick her out.
Right.
The journalism department had a big protest, and all the journalists who were liberal were like, we're not going to stand for this free speech. So they basically shut the whole program down. So I had to find something else to do.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So did you find Baylor because your dad was a Baptist preacher? I mean, was that kind of the genesis of how that kind of evolved?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of a joke, but kind of not growing up. He went to Baylor, and my mom, that's where he met my mom, and he would say, you can go to any college you want, but I'll pay your way to Baylor. So I just kind of always wanted to go to Baylor. My dad was a bear trainer at Baylor.
Really?
Yeah, and so I wanted to go to Baylor and be a bear trainer. So luckily, I got to do that.
Did you really?
Yeah.
What is so tell me about that bear. Is it? They've got to change it every year, right? Because don't they typically bring in cubs? Like they're small.
Yeah. So now it's a zoo, whereas before it was a mascot. I mean, we carried it on the field and all that, and now the the animal rights people, and I think the bear was not mistreated, but it definitely was not living a life of the wild. But I'm not sure sitting in a concrete cave on campus is living in the wild either, right?
True.
So, but back in our day, in my dad's day, they did not declaw them. And so there's pictures of him with a chain and another guy with a chain and a big collar. And I'm like, I've dealt with the bear.
Right.
And no one man is strong enough to keep a bear off of another man, even when he's holding the chain. So I wouldn't have done it. Our bears were declawed.
Yeah.
I can't support the human rights. I just knew that I was 17 years old and I wanted to do what my dad did. So I went and I was a bear trainer. So if people want to get mad at me because we did stuff with a bear, I can't, we definitely treated it well.
Yeah.
But people may say, well, that's not well. But anyway, our bear was rescued.
Okay.
The bear that I dealt with. And so it had cigarette burn marks on its paws.
Oh, man.
And so he was a bit of a pill because any little thing would scare him because, am I going to get tortured again? And so he was found in a mobile home, in a mobile home trailer in a mobile home park and was rescued. He was pretty young still, but somebody was abusing him. So we, Judge Robert called him Robbie, and at that time you would get a bear when it was a cub.
Yep.
And you would the bear. I was assistant bear trainer. The head bear trainer would sleep with the bear and just spend 100% of his time with the bear and imprint the bear as if the bear trainer was the mother.
Yeah.
And so,
this is a lot of responsibility.
It was interesting. Put it that way. Yeah. There's a lot of bear stories.
Do we run with the bear out on the field back in the day?
Yeah.
Does that still happen or no?
Oh, no. They don't let him out of the zoo type setting now.
Got it.
Yeah.
So he's not even on the sideline in a cage or any of that stuff. Okay.
When my dad was bear trainer, they played the University of Arkansas, and as my dad told the story, I'm sure not everybody was drunk, but he said everybody was drunk. And this guy, they had put the bear in the trailer to cart it back to Waco, and this guy comes up and he's holding a beer and he's sticking his finger in the cage at the bear and said, "That's a bear. That's a bear." And the bear reached up and bit his finger off. And I go, "What happened?" He goes, "The guy walked off going, the bear bit my finger." He was so drunk he couldn't feel it. And my dad said, "We got out of there in a hurry."
So great.
Oh, man.
God. It's too bad the world isn't still kind of like that in some way.
There could be people who are like already writing a letter saying these guys are awful. They're,
Yes. Right.
So I was nominated to be on the board of the state of Texas School Land Board.
Okay.
And so the governor nominated me, and I had to go before the Senate nominating committee. And so the staffer carted me around to all the senators on the nominating committee.
Okay.
But the day before. So I get in with Kirk Watson, who's now mayor of Austin.
Yeah.
And Kirk said, "So you're a bear trainer?" I was like, "How do you know that?" He goes, "I did my research." I said, "Okay." And he goes, "When you were there, did a bear bite a young lady?" And I went, yeah. And he goes, "That young lady's my wife." And I said, "Did I say I was a bear trainer? I didn't go to Baylor. I went to Houston." and so I said, "Well, I'm sorry." So we get into the nominating hearing the next day.
Yeah.
And he starts telling this story, and it gets going pretty good. And I'm pretty sure he was going to vote against me. And he gets going real good, and he tells this story. And all of a sudden, the head of the committee said, "Senator Watson, your time's up. We'll go to Mr. Senator Johnson now." And he never got a chance to grill me. So I got approved.
That's so great. That's so great. So you get to Baylor. You start going through school after all your duties as a bear trainer, obviously. And then what do you get your degree in, and how'd you get in the business world? Like what was that path for?
Yeah, good question. I got my business degree.
Yep.
I started out trying to be in radio, TV, and that didn't work. So I went to business and graduated with a 2.4 GPA.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, you're a nicer guy than Bill Cawley. When I said that in front of Bill Cawley on a panel one time, he goes, "Well, I had a 2.2. And I'm like, "Okay, Bill, way to one up me." So just
if I wouldn't have turned it up my last couple of semesters, I probably would have been about a 2.2.
Okay, so you pursued it hard.
Yeah.
So you're in the same sales part of the business as me.
Yeah.
When you have a 2.4, they go, "You are good for sales."
That's right. Yes, they do.
Because we're not going to pay you a salary.
That's right.
And so
that's right.
So that's what I did. I stayed an extra year, really 2 years, and got a master's in education.
Okay.
Because I wanted to prove. At one point, I finally clicked in and said, "I want to prove to myself I can make grades." Now, education at the time wasn't as hard as business, but I made all A's in that program, and then a friend of the family, Bruce Harbor, was at Henry S. Miller before Grubb and Ellis bought him.
Yep.
And this was 1987. Well, in 86, he had made bukus of money, and his interns made $100,000 each. And this is 86, right? So, I mean, it was it was the tail end of SNL days, but nobody knew it was the tail end.
Right.
So, wait, this is 85. 85 he made that. So I joined him in late 85, and everything fell to pieces in 86. And so I think he made $30,000 total to him. So needless to say, I didn't get $100,000 worth of spiffs.
Right.
Right. So it was great from the standpoint of I hadn't built up a high cost lifestyle.
Right.
So I just ate peanut butter and jelly and McDonald's for 2 years and tried to make a go of it.
What were you focusing on back in those days?
Yeah, so I was in the land division. So we're focused on land. So I was a land broker there for 9 years.
Okay.
And then I hired on with Charlie Adams and Philip Wiggins at Stratford.
Okay.
And was with them for 4 years.
All right.
And then Cliff Fisher asked me to come over and be a tenant rep broker for FedEx.
Yeah.
And I did that for 4 years. And the last two, I was the account manager for Cliff for FedEx Ground. FedEx had bought RPS and turned them into FedEx Ground. And so in the last 2 years I was at Fisher, we did 80 build-a-suits in 80 different cities. And I was the account manager for that. I did deals myself, and then did the account manager and kind of managed a lot of the Fisher brokers on their deals. So luckily, they were all real good. I didn't have to tell them how to do a deal, but I had to do all the reporting back to FedEx. So.
Yeah. How long had he had the FedEx account at that point, roughly?
Maybe 3 or 4 years.
Okay, so pretty early.
Maybe longer, but not too far.
Yeah. What do you think was the key to him getting that account back in the day?
I don't ever want to compete with Cliff Fisher. Yeah. That guy is good.
Yeah.
He is intense. I've told this story before, but I was not there very long, and he said, "Scott, we're going to work a project together." And 48 hours later, not getting up from the desk except to go to the bathroom, we finished the project. So Cliff can be really intense.
Yeah.
And he's all about servicing the client.
Yeah.
And I think he has a contract with FedEx now, but when I was there, it was a handshake deal.
Wow.
And so he's like, if you screw it up, we'll lose the account. And I'm not going to be able to send my kids to college. So Rohrman, don't screw it up. So it's a pretty good pressure packed situation. Sure. And FedEx wants their comment to you is, we do everything overnight. Why can't you? And I'm like, well, real estate, building a building doesn't happen overnight. And they're like, well, that's our mentality and our culture. So it was a great place to learn, and made good money.
Tremendous amount of reps right there. Learned so much. Yeah,
we did because that was just the build-a-suits. We were doing probably 200 renewals every year.
Right.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah, so I got there and they gave me 36 deals, 3 build-a-suits, and 33 plus or minus renewals. So I start doing these renewals, and somebody said, well, you're new here. How many deals you work? I said 33, and they go, yeah. And I said, what is that? And they're like, how many of them are whiffers? I went, I don't know what a whiffer is. He goes, well, those are deals you do the deal and you don't get a commission. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, go read the lease you're renewing. I went and read the lease, and Cushman & Wakefield was in the lease saying that if you renew, you got to pay Cushman & Wakefield. So Cushman was smart, right?
Yeah,
but
sure.
But so we're doing the deals, and the landlord's like, I'm not paying 2 commissions.
Right.
And I'm obligated to pay Cushman. So I did 33 renewals and made nothing.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's kind of like, do you want the account? You're going to do this.
Yeah.
And you go, well, we want the account. So.
Yeah, that game has ended for the most part. I mean, I'm sure there's probably a few old legacy leases out there, but
yeah, typically that's not written into the lease.
That's not normal these days. But yeah, smart on Cushman's part.
Hey, you can't blame them. They're smart guys and gals.
So you get, you land broker, tenant rep broker, and then what's the next step in the journey, Scott?
Well, I was doing deals for FedEx, and we were sending out requests for proposal to developers.
Yep.
And then the developers would send in their bids, and then you would qualify them. And so you start developing a relationship with the developers. I mean, you're representing the tenant, but you're getting to know the developers.
Sure.
And one of them said, I want to open a Dallas office. Would you open the office for me? And I knew him. I liked him. It was Ron McMahon. He's now deceased, but he was a great guy and had the same Christian faith that I have. And I said, I'd like to talk to you about that. And so that's what happened. I opened a Dallas office for him. Mm-hmm. I was a junior partner, and it was he didn't give me any business. He expected me to go get the business, find the equity, find the debt. And all I had ever been was a broker. So now I'm out being a developer. What I did have backing from him was on the construction side, because I didn't know anything about construction.
Yep.
So he had people who could manage that.
Yep.
But I had to go find the tenant, find the deal, find the land, find the debt, find the equity. And so it was a baptism by fire as well.
Sure was.
Yeah.
And how long did you do? How many years? What were you doing? How long?
I did that 4 years.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who runs the West Coast for Crow, he looked at me one day and goes, "Yeah, you're one of those 4-year guys." 4-year guys. What's that? He goes, "A guy that changes every 4 years. You can't stick in one place." And I'm like, "Oh, I kind of resemble that remark."
Yeah.
And he had been at Crow for 20 years at the time. Right. And so, but I'm like, I'm just kind of, it wasn't planned. I just go to the next opportunity when it comes up. Luckily, they were all move ups and not, I had to scoot out the back door at the last minute,
Right.
So, but so I worked with McMahon as a junior partner for 4 years and then went out on my own with a 50-50 partner and started Hunter Equity. We did that 9 years.
So you did more than 4.
Yeah, so 2 places I did not. Yeah. And so, and then after 9 years of Hunter Equity, I started 42 Real Estate.
Yeah.
And that was in 2011. So it's been 13 years.
And when did you buy your first property in Deep Ellum?
It would have been April of 2012.
Okay. And when you started, did you think, I'm going to own 55 properties in Deep Ellum?
No. So we had bought the Macy's building at Valley View Mall.
Yes.
And it was on like 20 acres. And I bought it with a partner, and we raised the money from limited partners, and it was a co-general partner. And so we thought we'd put under contract and might not be able to close because of mall. You've got CC&Rs and reciprocal easement agreements, and all kinds of conditions and restrictions. And so we put under contract, we get the title documents, and they were maybe 7 reams of paper tall.
Oh boy.
And as it happened, when they got printed out, the very top document was termination of REA and CC&Rs, the reciprocal easement agreement. And so this was a deal that Trammell Crow had done with Henry S. Miller Sr. Back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a quote with Henry S. Miller before he died. It was in some publication. They said, "What's the best deal you ever did?" He goes, "Selling Trammell Crow the land for Valley View Mall." He goes, "What's the worst deal you ever did?" "Not investing in the deal for Valley View Mall." And so I had started my career at Henry S. Miller. And so what had happened was in 1970 something, who would have thought 50 years would come and go?
Right.
Right. Or 40 or whatever it was. So it expired prima facie. It expired on its own terms.
Oh,
and
wow.
we didn't have to go negotiate CC&Rs with anybody.
Wow.
So it's, my wife always says, I'd rather you be lucky than good.
Yeah.
And that was lucky. And so
that was luck.
we
Good.
sold that deal, put it under contract to sell it for double our money within 9 months, and forced them to wait to buy it for 13 months so we could get long-term capital gains. And so it turned out okay.
Yeah. And is that kind of what propelled you to get involved down in Deep Ellum, or how did
Thanks for bringing me back. I got lost in my own talk.
You're good.
While we owned it, I started getting phone calls from people who were saying, we're looking for infill. Well, I was a land broker, so we always looked on the outskirts, the next,
Yep.
And I remember Dan Tomlin had aerials in his office, and he showed that basically, at least going north up through Plano, we would fill in every 10 years, we'd fill in 1 mile on the grid. So, if it was Legacy, whatever was north of Legacy, we'd fill all that in. That was all those streets in Plano are a mile apart.
Yep.
And so you'd fill that swath in. Well, as you go farther north, the concentric circle gets bigger. So 1 mile was, X amount of land.
Yep.
But if you're 3 miles up, that half of the arc is twice as big or three times as big. So it takes longer. And so Target was going to buy land. They had bought at 75 and 380. And it looked like they were going to go on a site we had at Custer in 380 and then a site at 423. And so the spacing was perfect and we're locked in.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, Target goes at El Dorado and the toll road. Well, now they can't go to the toll road at 380. They have to go to the toll road to east of the toll road at Coit and west to 423.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, Coit is where the Target's going to go, and it's too close to Custer. So all of a sudden, I'm holding a property that Target doesn't want to go on. So we real quickly sold our property at Custer and 380.
Yeah.
And then I realized that the frontier is going to take longer.
Yeah.
So whereas you would buy a property and say in 10 years, I know they're going to be buying from me and I can program my IRR. So I said, what's the new frontier? And that's when we started getting phone calls from Valley View Mall saying we're interested in infill. So I had this thought, the new frontier is infill.
Yep.
So one day I was talking to Mike Geisler and was talking about all this, and he goes, well, you need to buy in Deep Ellum. I'm like, dude, I've only been to Deep Ellum twice, and both times I thought I wouldn't get out of there alive. I don't want to go to Deep Ellum.
Right.
And one day he kidnapped me and took me down there, and it was, again, lucky timing. They had just shut down the entrance into Deep Ellum because it was a tunnel. If you remember, you went under the railroad tracks, had a big mouth painted on the tunnel.
Yeah.
And they had closed all that down. You couldn't get into Deep Ellum. You had to drive around Deep Ellum and come in the back way.
Yeah.
So it was just deader in the door. And it was also 07 to 11 was a tough time.
Tough time.
So when we showed up, it was just not quite yet coming out of the downturn, and they had just opened Good Latimer back up where you could get in.
Yeah.
And so everybody's like, we're just so glad to see a buyer. And so we bought relatively cheaply.
Yeah.
I took the deal to Jack Matthews and I said, would you like to invest? He said, what's your basis? I said, we're buying at $60 a foot, which I thought was pretty cheap. He goes, well, I bought all my stuff at $8 a foot, so you're a fool. and I remember walking. I don't think he said you're a fool. He said, I'm not interested in buying at that basis. So I went home thinking, oh my gosh, I'm stupid. This is never going to work. And I started running the numbers. I said, I may be wrong, and I'll have to go to my investors and tell them I screwed up. But I really felt like we could make it work. And we ended up selling at a whole lot higher number than 68. So it worked out.
Well, it was great to see the renaissance of that area under your tutelage.
There was other people.
I know.
But I will say when we went in, we started putting in place some ideas that had not been there before. And then other people started getting on board. And so if it weren't for some of the other property owners down there, I don't think we would not have accomplished what we accomplished, but we had a lot of help. So it was really good.
Yeah. What's your favorite place down there today?
Oh, today, well, I love Dot's Hop House and Cocktail Courtyard. One of my favorite little shops is Jade and Clover. Giselle Ruggerberg owns that, and they do terrariums and succulents. And she has a great concept where a lot of times you go in, ladies are sitting there creating little bowls of sand, the Indian kind of stuff, and making designs in it, and then they put the succulents in. But while they're doing it, they're having a bridesmaids party, drinking white wine, and has a really great time. So, that's all pretty fun. And then Cold Beer Company on the East End is a great spot. So,
my favorite jukebox in all of Dallas is in Deep Ellum. Would you guess what place that?
Adair's?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's so great.
The burgers are great.
The burger's incredible.
Yeah.
You get a Coors Original still there in the can.
Right.
This feels right.
Yeah, banquet beer, baby.
The banquet beer. And that place has been there forever.
Forever. It was there before we showed up. Yeah.
I mean, did you get all the way down to I'm trying to think of the name. Sons of Herman Hall. Did you get all the way?
So we still own property right next to Sons of Herman Hall. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's been there late 1800s, right?
Oh, that's a great story. Yeah. I mean, Sons of Herman Hall. It's a Herman with two N's.
Yeah.
It was built by a German fraternity, and they shipped a lot of German woodsmiths over, and that building's basically built with no nails. It's all tongue and groove, handcrafted joints, mortise joints, cornice joint, whatever you call it, joints, and it's really a cool building.
So neat.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that that I love seeing things re-energized like that, and the epic now that's there in Deep Ellum.
Yeah.
And then, what's the old, the Sons of Pythagoras, or what was the building?
If you hadn't said it, it's, so that was a Pythias.
Pythias.
Yeah, it was that was a African-American fraternal order out of either Galveston or Corpus.
Yeah.
And they came up and built a building to house commerce for African-American.
Yeah.
And so on the first floor was retail.
Yeah.
Second floor were doctors, lawyers, accounting. Third floor was I think a insurance office. And then the top floor was a ballroom.
Yeah.
And so, but it was all for African-American professionals to be able to have a place to office. And George Washington Carver, who, did all the stuff with peanuts and all that, his son-in-law, Sidney, I'm drawing a blank, Pittman, I think it is. He was the first African-American architect licensed by the state of Texas. And he designed that building. Yep. And George Washington Carver did a presentation there on the sweet potato in the ballroom. So it's got a lot of great history.
I just always remember for years just driving along that little swath and always seeing that building just sitting there and going, man, somebody's got to redevelop that someday.
Yeah, I'm glad Westdale did. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to see that place repurposed. So where's the opportunity today in commercial real estate?
Man, I don't know,
Scott.
I don't know. I think
or what are you up to these days?
Okay, what are we up to? We've got some corporate tenants that we're building small industrial buildings for. We're in 20 states active right now, and we've built in 40 states total plus Canada. And people say Scott Rohrman, they all go Deep Ellum, and that's fine.
Yeah,
but we didn't even have a website till 3 years ago,
yeah.
So people didn't really know what we were doing, and that's okay. We weren't trying to advertise much. But yeah, we've built in 40 states. We're closing in on $1 billion worth of projects. And
that's
so
awesome.
For us, we're just a little small company. We got one office and 14 people. And so that includes receptionist, bookkeeper, the whole 9 yards. So we've been working pretty hard for us, but there's some corporations who have a need for some buildings, and so we hope that we can build for them. We own a fair amount of land, and so some data center guys have approached us, and so we're working with those guys. We don't know if it'll work or not, but that's kind of a Wild West kind of situation with this data center stuff.
It really is.
And you might pick up on a little bit of what I'm not going to go into in detail, but solar and wind cannot supply enough energy for these data centers.
That's right.
And so if we're going to try to get rid of fossil fuels, we're going to have to find something else to power. Even with fossil fuels, we're going to have a hard time meeting the energy demands.
Yep.
So that's something that's kind of out there.
Yep.
That AI, crypto,
sure,
all this is not going away.
Yep.
And there's going to have to be some way to figure out how to meet the power needs.
Yep.
And so that's really, I love puzzles.
Sure.
Someone was asking me one time, and I didn't mean to say it, but she wrote it down. So I think she's the one who coined the phrase, but after what I said, she said, "You like puzzles and people." And that's what drives me. Give me a good puzzle. I love to try to figure it out. And I love interacting with people. So the data center world is a really fascinating puzzle right now. So luckily we happen to have some land that seems to be interesting to data centers. So they're calling us anyway. So we're trying to figure that puzzle out. We are moving into spec development. So it was really interesting. Stephen Holly has left the company where he was, and he built quite a few successful projects with them. And he started his own company recently, Holly Development Company. And so we've entered into a joint venture with him to do spec development. Well, we already owned land, free and clear, no debt, that will house 7 million square feet of industrial. And you and I have talked about that. Sure. And so I told him, I said, you can't do a joint venture with us and grab hold of our land. You got to go find your own land.
That's right.
And so, you've got to add value, not just suck value. And so, and he's great with that. We're having fun working together. He offices in our offices. And he's on our server, and it's two different companies, but we're having fun. And so we already have some contracts working to acquire some
That's
land.
Great.
So, but we're going to move in with my current team. We're going to move into spec development, whereas the last 20 years we've done really nothing but build a suit. But for 20 years we've been doing industrial. So
decent little asset class over the last 20 years.
Again, I'd rather be lucky than good. And we were lucky to be there, and luckily we executed pretty well. I think the clients seem to they keep giving us deals, so I guess we're executing okay.
And that's interesting. You've done a lot of build-to-suit work. I'd love to hear your take on, and you're working with a lot of these I've got to think, Fortune 500 type companies. Some of them, if not all. And what is their temperature right now of the economy, and are they still in expansion mode? I mean, it sounds like they are.
I'd say that several of the companies we were working with have shut down their expansion. These are big companies, and so they're really scratching their head trying to figure out what to do, I think. In other words, the real estate department keeps telling us, we don't know what we're going to do the next 12 months. We have to wait till the finance people and the C-suite guys tell us how much money is going to be available, and they're trying to figure all that out. But there are some companies who, for the health, welfare, and safety of their employees, have to have an upgraded building, or, they still have business. And so there are pockets of the economy that are growing. And so if a company is in the mode of servicing that pocket, then they are doing some building. So, but if it had stayed like it was 2.5 years ago, everybody was to be on full tilt, running straight ahead. My opinion is the Fed's not going to drop rates, and everyone I'm with disagrees with me. But I'm I tell them if they drop rates, it only helps me. If they don't drop rates and I plan on them not dropping rates, then maybe I'm a little bit less at risk.
Yeah.
So it'll be real. This time next year will be way more. I don't know if it'll be more clear, but I think it will be because the election's behind us.
Yep.
We'll know if Jerome Powell's been replaced or not.
Yep.
I hear that whether Biden or Trump gets elected, they're going to replace Jerome Powell. I don't know. I have no idea. But right now we're just I watch, Squawk Box, and they have guests on. And one day the guests are going, we got 3 rate drops between now and the election. Right. The very next day, they're like, they're not going to drop rates. They may increase the rates. So I don't think anybody knows.
I don't think anybody knows either, and it seems what's so weird about this one, and you've been through more downturns than I have, but this one's just like taking so long to play out, versus.
It feels like it.
Versus, 09,
Just fell off a cliff.
Fell off the cliff and, 90 days later, we're at the bottom, and then we just started gradually working.
It took a while to get to full steam ahead, but we were within 90 days starting to climb the ladder.
Right.
And now, so this week, some news feed I got sent me a deal saying that Bank of America bought $3.2 billion worth of notes from WaFed, Washington Federal.
Right.
Well, I tried to back into the numbers. They pay $3.2 billion of loans. They paid $2.9 billion. I may not have done the math right, but I think that's a 50 basis point premium or discount to
discount. Yes.
I don't think Bank of America spends $2.9 billion to get a 50 basis point Benny.
Right.
Right. I think the Feds twisted their arm and said, you're infusing cash into WaFed and this is the way you're going to do it. I may be wrong. Nothing's told me that.
Yeah.
I can't subscribe any truth to that, but I'm sitting here scratching my head going, if I had $2.9 billion, am I really going to buy those notes at that little of a discount?
Right.
I don't think I would.
No.
And Bank of America is not dumb.
No.
So I think there's something behind it that the Feds are saying, we'll back it or we'll do something. I don't know. But then you got Barry Sternlicht coming out saying he thinks regional banks are going to go under.
Yep.
Right? You got Jamie Dimon saying, well, they're not going to drop rates and we're going into a recession. You got some billionaire bond guy, I forget his name, said we are going to have a recession in 2024.
Right.
And then yet we've got people saying we're going to have 5 rate drops.
I know.
And so I don't know the answer. What concerns me is I really hope that 5 years from now we still have strong regional banks, because if the Feds just have all these regional banks and they let Bank of America and JP Morgan and Chase absorb them all,
right?
I can't go borrow money from Bank of America very easy. Right? It's not about Bank of America. No. It's about the fact the size that they are. It's not their culture or their people.
That's right.
It's just the size. They're like, we don't want to give you a $3 million loan, right? We're doing $300 million loans. And I do $3 to $30 million loans. I've done a $70 million loan, but that's the biggest I've ever done. Yeah. So I'm just going to worry-wart them to death coming in. Can I have a $10 million loan? Right. Like, we can't make money off of you. So I think maybe a Bank of America guy will go, we have a department that'll do that for you, but I just hadn't found them yet. So call me. but my concern, we really need to, and so I'm talking to bankers. A bank out of Florida just bought Independent Bank.
Right.
And, I am friends with guys over at Independent, and they're like, they didn't tell me this specifically, but reading between the lines, the amount of regulation that's been put on banks in the last 10 years is unbelievable. So you can't run a small regional bank anymore. Your cost of compliance just kills you. And so you've got to get to a certain size. Yeah. And so it's forcing everything to consolidate. Yeah. My concern is over time, I'm going to have a hard time calling my friendly banker and saying I need to borrow $10 million, and he goes, "Oh yeah, come on over and we'll do a deal." So it'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of things out there that could create problems, but at the same time, that old proverb of crisis creates opportunity. So
for sure,
we're also bullish.
Yeah. Plus, we're in DFW at the end of the day.
Oh my gosh, aren't we lucky
we really
to be
are.
in Dallas Fort Worth?
You know, I mean,
yeah,
positive net migration, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, that's gonna. I always say we're the last one in, the first one out, and it's
proven up. It's proven up for a lot of time. You know, you know, I'm just a guy from Mississippi who had a 2.4 GPA, and Dallas said, "You want to work your tail off,
right, and
bring me something that I can make money on? Right. I'll work with you."
Yeah,
and there's a lot of places that's not the case. So I owe Dallas my whole career, and I'm just unbelievably grateful.
Yeah,
and we're so lucky, you and me. I mean, you're younger than me, but we're closer in age. Yeah. We are standing on the shoulders of Trammell Crow and you know, Jeff Swope and Mark Myers and all these guys. I mean, we're Roger Staubach,
Henry S. Miller.
Henry S. Miller. I mean, we're just so lucky to have had those people go before us and build such a strong industry. I
was talking, almost everybody I have on the podcast, we talk about this, but Michael Levy was in here the other day. He was the CEO of Crow Holdings. And we were just talking, you know, he spent his whole life in New York City. So he came to work for Harlan 7 years ago. And just talking about, you know, how Dallas now is just at the forefront of every investor in the world.
Interesting.
Wants to invest here. Whereas, you know, 20 years ago,
it was the coast.
It was the coast.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now everybody wants to be in Dallas. Everybody wants to be in Texas. And then I think the biggest thing, you know, he talked about as well is just this mentality that this city has of wanting to help other people. And if Scott Rohrman's winning, you know, Conrad's winning.
Yeah.
And there's just this.
But at the same time, we compete with each other like
cats,
cats and
if
dogs.
You can win here, you can win anywhere.
Well, and so we've done business in 40 states.
Right.
And I'm just telling you, the quality of brokers, all the brokers, not all, but most of the brokers we work with in these 40 states are super nice people.
For sure.
But the quality of their professionalism, even though they're at the top of their game in their city,
right,
it's not what it is here.
Right.
It's just not. I mean, there's just here, it's unbelievable.
But I think what the cool thing is, even though we compete all the time, there's also a willingness to share. Right.
Yeah.
Hey, man, what did you pay for this? What did that deal trade for? How did you figure that deal out? You know, and people here are willing to share that information because they want to see everybody to be successful.
Well, you know, Mark Myers and Jeff Swope are still doing deals.
Right.
They're still building buildings.
Yes.
And so we're building buildings.
Right.
And so we're kind of sort of competitors.
Sure.
Pryor Blackwell and Tom Weiser and Chuck Anderson are building buildings.
That's right.
I've called all those guys and said, I've got an issue I don't know how to solve. Would you help me think it through? And every one of them has said, sure, come on over. Let's meet.
Yeah.
And so they could have said, you're kind of a competitor. I'm not helping you. And they've all been wonderful and, you know, help educate me. Yeah. And they don't get anything out of it. Maybe I should give them a bottle of wine. I'll do that. I'm going to give them
is there anything that you would have done differently in your career, Scott?
Well, I can answer that two ways. And if you don't mind, I'd like to answer it in both.
For sure.
One is I'm a Christian and I've lived my life that way. But I think early on, I wasn't willing to just hand everything over to God and be dependent upon him. I kept saying, God, I love you. I know you. You died on the cross for me, but I want to be successful. So I'm going to kind of keep this part to myself. And it wasn't until I was really just driven to my knees. And I was like, I can't do. I'm out of rope of Scott Rohrman. I have no more Scott Rohrman rope left.
Yeah.
And so I wish that I had gotten to that point of total dependence on Jesus before I did.
Wow.
And I think I would have been. I might have been less successful. I don't know. But once I got there, the success as a definition of money or number of deals or prestige or kind of left. And it wasn't important. And so that's something I would, if I had to do over again, I would really
put your faith in
claim
Christ.
my faith in daily life way more than I did. I claimed it, but I didn't live it.
Yeah.
I was never like, out doing stupid stuff,
right.
Having affairs or cheating people or stuff. But I just, on a daily life, I think I would have been a more peaceful person.
Yeah.
And there's a couple people who are still with me who had to bear the brunt of that. And I've gone to them and said, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was leaning on my own, and it created anxiety. And so I would pop off and yell, and I wish I hadn't done that. So that I would do that part different. The other part is, I say I want to do this, would have done this differently, but I'm ADD, and I don't know if I really could have. I think I would have made more money if I had picked a product type and just done that.
Yeah.
And so Mark Gibson invested in Deep Ellum, and I'm not saying that out of turn because he's told people in public that.
Sure.
So I don't like talking about my investors and who's. But when I went to him to invest in Deep Ellum, he goes, "Dude, don't do that. Just focus on industrial. You'll make way more money." And there was just something in me that, I don't know if this is true. It felt like this is true, that I just had to do it.
Yeah.
And so, God has given me more money than I have a right to steward. And he's like, steward it well. And so, I might have just focused on one product type and just done it over and over and made a bunch of money.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people in Deep Ellum that I never would have had a chance to ever rub shoulders with.
Right.
And it really brings a richness to your life to know people who live life differently.
Sure.
And look different.
I think that was one of the coolest
smell different.
I think that was one of the coolest things about your induction is they went out and they talked to a lot of people, right?
Right.
But they also talked to so many of the people who were some of your tenants that, were there in Deep Ellum.
Yeah.
And it truly shows the character of you, as a guy who's the landlord. And a lot of times landlords can be very absent sometimes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And not accessible. And I mean, man, you wanted to know these companies, their business, what they're doing. And those people spoke so highly of you. That's awesome.
Well, if you root around long enough, you'll find people who have something negative to say, I'm sure. But we made a real, when the leasing team, Mike Eisler was on the deal, and he goes, it was unorthodox to say the least. The leasing team would say, we've got this person, man, woman group that wants to lease space. And I say, okay, let's meet. And they're like, it's 800 square feet.
Right.
You've got
bigger
all this square footage. And I'm like, if we're going to do this right, we got to do it right for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of hours talking to people.
Yeah.
And 80% of them, there was no way they could ever afford to lease the space. They didn't have a good enough business plan to make it work.
Right.
But we decided just to be nice and invest in people's lives. And so I'm pretty sure the brokers would tell you that's what we did. And so there were many times when I took a flyer on a tenant and I tell them, I think you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And they're like, I got to do. And so we had a rule that we weren't putting up all the TI. We would only put up 50%.
Yeah.
And that knocked a lot of people out. But I had a lot of people who were cashing in life insurance, and they were spending their whole life savings, and they were, and we didn't force them to do it.
Right.
And we made them all sign personal guarantees. Wow. And maybe edit this out, or if you die, I'll live with whatever you decide to edit or edit out. We never pursued a single personal guarantee. If they didn't make it, I wasn't going to go after them and try to take their car and get a judgment against them and all that. So we would just waive the personal guarantee. So one of them said, well, if you don't go after them, why do you have it? I said, I want them focused.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want it to be a guarantee that I'm not going to go after them. If there's a chance for them to pour their heart and soul, because I'm pouring my heart and soul.
That's true.
I would go down there on Saturdays, go home and have dinner with my wife and go back to, after my date with my wife, I'd go back to Deep Ellum until 4 a.m. because I was wanting to know what life was like at all hours of the day.
Wow.
So if I'm going to spend that kind of time, I want my tenants to as well. So one of the things we did, we put in the lease that you had to sweep your front stoop, I call it, the front walk, by 9 in the morning. And you had to do the neighbor on the left, the neighbor on the right. And then the neighbor on the right had to do yours, which is on the left, and his on the right. And they said, well, aren't we paying for common area maintenance? And I said, yeah. They're like, then why don't you have your porter do that? And I said, because I want you committed.
Yeah.
I want to know that you're here for the community.
Yeah.
And so,
that's how you meet your neighbors, right?
Well, that too. Yeah. So, it was fun. We put things in the leases that we didn't allow bottle service. We didn't allow club type atmospheres. We didn't allow VIP tables. We wanted it to be, so I went to more of a community. One of my tenants had roped off a table, and it was a Friday at 5:30, so it was early. But he had roped off these 2 tables, and I was like, "I'm taking the ropes down." And the guy didn't know who I was, and he goes, "You can't do that, sir. Dak Prescott's coming tonight." And I was like, "We're taking the ropes down." And he goes, "Well, Dak Prescott has to have this." I said, "Call Dak Prescott and tell him not to come." And for the people who don't know who Dak Prescott is, a quarterback of Dallas Cowboys. And so he goes, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "We don't do this, okay?" I said, "Let's figure out how to make a community that can support itself without having to cater to people who are." And I understand if you're Dak Prescott, you got to be careful. Right?
Sure.
So I understand. I wasn't mad at Dak. I understand that Dak probably needs that, but I didn't want Deep Ellum to turn into bottle service and haves and have-nots. And I wanted to be egalitarian. So anyway,
that's super cool. What advice would you give to young kids today getting into commercial real estate?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. First is, so I meet with a good number of young people.
You do.
Mostly young men, and just like you do too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. My oldest son one time said, "Dad," he was a senior in college, and he said, "A friend of mine is trying to figure out what to do, and can I bring him up and have you help him? He doesn't have a family, and he didn't have anyone he didn't know how to turn. He came from a poor area." And I said, "Sure." He goes, "And Dad, when I bring him up here, he's an atheist, so you can't talk about Jesus." And I said, "Well, then don't bring him." And he called me back and said, "Okay, he's coming." I told him, "You're going to talk about Jesus." And we did. And, it's really interesting. I told him, I don't know how to do this without Jesus. And so he came to Dallas, got into real estate. I called Venture Commercial, Mike Geisler.
Yeah, sure.
And I said, "This guy doesn't know, come here from Sikkim about real estate." But he was a Latin and Greek major, and he's smart as a whip, and he will work really hard. And so he did, and did well, and now he's working at another company doing acquisitions. And Kirk Williams called me one day, and he goes, "Do you know so-and-so?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I've been meeting with him for a year, telling him about my Christian faith." And so it's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right? So when I'm telling a young person to get in, I say, I have to be, like I said earlier in this conversation, totally dependent upon God.
Yeah.
So that's the number one thing I have to tell them is I don't know how to do it without it. I do. You work really hard, and but so I start with that, and then I say work really hard. So I have a few things I tell people. I say, get to the office an hour before your boss. Don't leave till an hour after. Always raise the bar. If this is a spreadsheet that we send out, you're an analyst, and this is a spreadsheet we send out to the equity guy, figure out how to make it better. Right?
Right.
figure out how to make it look prettier if that's all you can do.
Yeah.
Right? Figure out how to make a better summary or, improve it, do something. Right? Yeah. And so a young man was trying to get in the oil business, and he was doing an internship, and I called him and said, get up here and office with us, because it was hadn't had the internship yet. He was doing a project to try to get the internship. So they sent him down to South Texas to review one of their well sites. And I said, drive around to all the other well sites, take pictures, do a write-up, do 2 well sites per page with some data, location, here's this, and so forth. And he did it, and he turned it in, and he told me, I turned it in, and I said, how'd it go? I was so excited because I was going to prove to this guy that going above and beyond. He goes, that's really not accepted in the oil and gas business for you to take pictures of someone else's well. I was like, oh crap, I'm so sorry. And he goes, so I really stepped in it because of you. And then he said, but they did say that was amazing initiative, amazing way to ended up getting a job with them. And he's now doing really well. Yeah. So the goal is to raise the bar. I have so many young people who say, well, I want to be where you are. I'm like, do you? Right? But they ask you that too, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And do you?
Right.
Right? Are you willing to stay at the office till 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday?
Right.
Right? Because I want to be ready on Monday, and this is the only time I can do it. Yeah. So I say work really hard and work smart.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, Jack First, says if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
The person with the most information usually wins.
Yeah.
And so, when I was a land broker, I can't tell you how many times in the first year I would walk in and show a property, and I remember Butch McCaslin going, "Where's the sewer?" I don't know.
Yeah.
He goes, "What size the water line?" I don't know. Man, I left there feeling like heel, and he was just asking normal good questions, and I should have known the answer, but I wasn't smart enough to know that. So I learned the hard way. And another thing is do what you say you're going to do, and then admit if you don't know it. So many times people try to fudge it. Well, the water's, you got enough water. Well, just say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you.
Don't be afraid to say, I don't know.
But follow it up with, I'll get back to you. Yeah. And then do.
That's right.
And so the other thing is, so many times I've failed, but I've developed a really good client when I work extra hard to overcome the failure. And they're like, nothing's going to stop this guy. So if I'm coming across cocky, I don't mean to be. I've had to work hard. I've had lots of failures. So.
Oh, for sure. We have all failed way more than we win. Yeah. It's a little what's problem with this generation, honestly.
Yeah.
They've never lost.
Right.
Until they get out in the real world is really the first time they start losing in life. Yeah. Right? I mean, and that's hard.
Yeah. I think that Dallas is great. We have a lot of people that I think you and I can pretty much call anybody in Dallas who's in real estate and get a meeting.
Right.
And not because of our reputation, but because we're asking for a meeting and we give them a value proposition.
Right.
But it's competitive as hell.
Oh, yeah.
And, there's just some people I'm not sure I want to compete with. I don't want to compete with Cliff Fisher heads up. I don't want to compete with Phil Puckett leasing office space heads up. I mean, it's just, these guys are good.
That's right.
So, but that makes us better.
That's it. It all sharpens everyone else's swords, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. What, do you have a most memorable deal or story that you'd like to share with the audience? Something.
So, one of the things that I got into the business, and they gave me a cube and a phone and said, start calling owners and see if they'll sell. I got hold of one, and he said, I'll sell. And I said, what price? He named a price. I had no idea if it was a good price or not.
Right.
I went and showed it to somebody, and lucky enough, that guy wanted to buy it. So we did a letter of intent, which was fairly self-explanatory. And then we had to go to contract. And they said, well, use the board form and just fill in the blanks. Well, I took it home and read it. And I came back and I'm like asking the guy across, who was in an office, but across the aisle from my cube.
Yeah.
And he'd been in the business 20 something years and was a pretty good producer. And I said, what does specific performance mean? And what does this mean? And what does this mean? And he's like, just fill in the blanks. And I was like, I can't do that. I got to know what it means. And that's before the computers were on your desk. You didn't have the internet.
Right.
So the only thing you could do is go to the library and go to the encyclopedia. Yeah. Well, I couldn't find specific performance and I wasn't smart enough to find a law book. And so, I just went around till I found somebody who could explain it to me.
Yeah.
So then I started doing leasing, and leases have really weird words in them. Exculpation and mutual subrogation. Yes. And so I called an attorney and who had done some deals with, and I said, I'm doing this lease, and can you explain to me what mutual subrogation is?
Yeah.
And he said, well, it's when you mutually together. I said, I got that part. Right. And he goes, in subrogation. I said, well, what does subrogation means? And he started describing, and I'm like, I don't want to know how it plays out. I want to know what the word means. And he goes, well, he'd been in the law business doing leases for 20 years. Yeah. And he goes, well, I said, well, what's the root word? He goes, I guess subrogate. I said, can't be. Sub is a prefix. Yeah. I said, it's got to be rogate. He goes, that sounds weird. He said, it probably cost me $2,500 for him to research. He called back the next day and said, rogate is the root word. It's Latin for stand in the place of. I said, okay, I got it. He's like, well, I want to explain it to you. I said, I got it. He's like, what do you mean? I said, we're going to mutually decide that we're going to subordinate our ability to stand in each other's place so that each one of us can stand on our own. He goes, well, that's better than I was going to explain. I was like, okay. So what I learned was, only once in my lifetime will that come into play, but I'm ready.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was funny. Another story is really not about me, but it was in the SNL days before the crash. A name, I won't mention it because people know the name, and they went out and put a big, huge property under contract. At the time, it was considered a big deal.
Yeah.
And they needed to go firm with $1 million after their inspection period, and then they had 30 days to close. 2 days before they had to go firm with $1 million, they got an offer for 3 times what they had it under contract for, and the buyer went firm with $2 million day one. So he got $2 million in his pocket the day before he went firm with $1 million.
Unbelievable.
He goes, but the closing on the $2 million firm contract was 30 days after he had to close. Well, it was a $40 million purchase, but he was selling it for a ton more than that.
Right.
So he closes. Who's going to walk $2 million?
Right.
Well, the seller's straw man walked the $2 million using the seller. So the seller made $38 million instead of $40 million. But it ensured the guy was going to close. And 2 days later, the SNL crisis hit. So that was, I'm sitting there going, wow, that was, I don't think that's ethical or fair, but boy, it was an interesting story. So, it kind of, you start building what am I willing to do and what am I willing to say to make money?
Right.
Right. And so there were a lot of stories coming out of the SNL crisis of crazy things. And so every once in a while I have to check, am I being ethical? Am I doing the right thing? And and people will disagree on that, but I got to make sure I feel like I am. And so that was an interesting, it was in Fort Worth, and it was called the Fort Worth Trick. And then the F word. And so, so I was like, if I ever write a book, that's going to be the title of one of the chapters.
You got to write that book, Scott. You got to write that book. That's so great. Thanks for sharing those awesome stories with us. We're going to close with what I call the C-suite closers, which are just kind of quick hitting questions to kind of get to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
What's something that most people don't know about you?
I'm a frustrated artist.
Okay.
I want to paint.
You like painting?
I do. I'm not good at it. Leon Backus is unbelievable. He's a master painter.
Interesting.
I'll never be that. But when I get the time to paint, and I love to go out on land and cut cedars. It makes me feel good. Every tree I cut, I'm saving some water, so I love that.
What's the most impactful book for you besides the Bible?
Yeah, the Bible. So C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. And then there's a book, A Lion is in the Streets. It's a fictionalized story of Huey Long, who is the governor of Louisiana who ran for president. And it's just a really good study of human nature.
Interesting.
And I love that book.
What does your morning routine look like?
I'm 62 now, and I realized that throughout the years I've gotten up at 5:30 and worked till 10:30, and sleep is way more important than I realized. So now I try to go to bed at 10, and then I sleep till I wake up, which is usually 6 a.m.
Yep.
And if I go to bed at midnight, I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. If I've run real hard all week, I may sleep till 7.
Yeah.
And I used to kick myself in the shins to, you got to be at the office by 7:30. If you're not waking up till 7, you can't. Yeah. But so my morning routine is I get up and I have the restaurant I like going to, and I typically go by myself. And the waiter one day said, "You need some friends." But it allows me to just kind of collect my thoughts.
Yeah.
And I read some Christian stuff on my phone, and then I go into the office and get rocking.
Get after it. Do you listen to any podcasts?
Yeah, I'm not a regular listener of any podcast, but Peterson, I always forget his first name, Joe or John Peterson.
Okay.
And then I listened to all of the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. It's about a church, one of the mega churches. Very interesting study on humanity. Take the Christian part out. It's a very interesting study on humanity.
Right.
And at the end, I don't think there's a lot of Christian stuff in that story, but I like How I Built This.
Okay. Yep.
And I like
that's a good one.
Revisionist History, Malcolm Gladwell.
Okay.
And there's a couple more I just can't think of them, but yeah.
What's the top 3 musicians or bands on your Spotify playlist?
Well, so I will not do Spotify or Pandora. I own all my music on my phone.
All right.
I buy it for $1.25 a pop.
There you go.
That's just, but
what do you like?
We got to take out what these musicians and bands are doing in their personal lives or political lives. You got to separate that.
Got to separate that.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Bruce Springsteen is, since
you love Bruce Springsteen, love the music.
Before Born to Run, I love Jungle Land and Born to Run before Born in the USA.
Yes.
Darkness on the Edge of Town. Bruce. Okay. Bruce is great. Love Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And then I have a lot of James has a song called Sit Down, which I listen to a lot. And Ben Rector has a song, Beautiful. And so I have a lot of songs that I've created my own playlist. And I put my playlist on random and shuffle and
sure.
Yeah. So I'm kind of picking out songs from people, but Willie Nelson's Redheaded Stranger is yeah.
I saw Willie a couple weeks ago.
Did you?
Yeah, he was down. He played in right outside of Greene in New Braunfels. There's a new place there called the Whitewater Amphitheater, which you should check out.
I need to.
It is right on the Guadalupe River.
Oh, wow.
And just majestic oak trees everywhere.
I bet you got limestone.
Yeah. It's gorgeous. And Robert Earl Keen opened for Willie, and I was like, I got to go down there.
Well, I'm really sad I didn't know about it because Robert Earl Keen is West Texture's album is unbelievable.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, he's one of my faves as well. I was like, okay, I got to go. Willie's 91.
Well, I can't believe, I guess marijuana works for him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Clearly.
So Robert Earl Keen sings a a lot about broken relationships, but he's never crying he's like,
no,
it's like, it's what happened. I'm going to sing about it, but it's never, oh, woe is me. His just like
storytelling is my favorite thing about Robert Earl.
Yeah,
it's incredible. If you could have coffee with one historical famous figure, who would it be?
Well, just like the book, the Bible,
Jesus, sure.
Yeah. So, I don't know, Gandhi, maybe
really?
Winston Churchill.
Okay.
So I try to watch the movie Gandhi once a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And his faith belief is not mine, but
sure.
And I don't know that I want to go on a hunger strike, but his ability to see past what was in front of him. I mean, he really could see the forest. He didn't get lost in the trees.
Right.
And really,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
If you could live anywhere else in the world, where would it be and why?
Well, I just got back from San Sebastian, Spain, and I think that's where I'd live. Yeah.
You love you some Spain.
What
is it? What is it about?
I don't know. I've been there twice for 2 weeks. I mean, 1 week each time.
Yeah.
And we've been to Italy a lot. I love Italy. And if you said you have to live in Italy, I go, okay. Sorry. Okay. But I don't know what it is about Spain. One, it's relatively inexpensive compared to other places.
Right.
But that was not the driver. It was the people in San Sebastian is where we were for half the time, and that's in Basque country.
Right.
They consider themselves Basque. They don't consider themselves Spaniards.
Right.
And so we would do things, and they would go nicely. They'd say, that's really not the Basque way. If you'll do it this way, we'd go, we're willing to do that. And all of a sudden, we're best friends, and it was – the people there are just amazing. The food is unbelievable.
Right.
And the weather's not perfect because it rains a fair amount, but it wasn't I kind of enjoyed the rain. I mean, it was, I don't see rain in Texas that much. So.
Right.
Unless it's lightning and I'm at the airport. The only time it rains is when I'm at DFW airport. Yeah.
What's your, do you have a favorite, what's your favorite thing about Dallas?
The people.
Yeah,
the people. And it's a big city, but my sister lives in Houston. She's planning an hour 15 every time she goes somewhere.
Right.
Now, we all tend to hang out in the areas where we are. If you're in Frisco, you're not going past Frisco.
Right.
I'm in north of downtown, and so I don't have to go to Salina. Right.
Yes.
So that would be – but in Dallas, generally it's 30 minutes, 45 on a
bad day.
Bad time of going home traffic or something. So I love that Dallas is a big city, but it's small. And I love the fact that people are welcoming.
Yeah.
It's just really awesome. And then we actually have some undiscovered things. The Trinity Forest, I think is the largest or second largest urban forest in America. And it's really undiscovered and underused, but we go down there a fair amount.
Do you really?
I love being outdoors.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
Tell me about what's your favorite restaurant? You going to give away this coffee spot that you go to? You gonna tell the audience where you go?
No, I'm going to keep that one a secret. So we have in our building, we own the building downtown, the corner of Main and Pearl. And it's where Jack Ruby did a telegraph wire 5 minutes before he shot Lee Harvey Oswald. So it's kind of a cool deal. So there's the Metropolitan Cafe is in there, and the lady that runs it, she says it's the only Ferrari-made coffee maker in Dallas. And so it literally is designed by Ferrari, and she had to have it shipped over from Europe. And so I get a cortado there almost every day. And so
it's got to be incredible.
I like it. I like it a lot. And then favorite restaurant, our family has made Javier's a celebration point for years and years. And
I'll be there tomorrow night.
Funny story. Well, I was just in Dallas. I had not made a deal, and I was working with a guy trying to sell his land, and his underling said, "Hey, it's late. My wife's out of town. Let's go to dinner." I said, "All right." He said, "Meet me at Javier's." I'd never been there before. we go in. I'm living on peanut butter and McDonald's, right?
Yes.
So I'm buying a $1.89, cheeseburger.
Right.
Well, I go in and everything's like
$19.
I'm like, $19.
Right.
And I was like, my credit card was maxed out. I'm like, I'm hoping this guy will buy, but I don't know if he is or not. And a lot of times brokers, you're a broker. I mean, we have to buy, right? So I'm like, so I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. It was the pollo ahumado, smoked chicken. It was $10.99, right? And I ate it and I loved it. And luckily he bought, so I didn't have to see if my credit card had enough room or not. But that was, I don't know, 30 years ago.
Right.
Only one time have I been to Javier's and I did not order the pollo ahumado, and I ordered something different, and it was good, but I missed having my pollo ahumado. So it's still the cheapest thing on the menu, although now I think it's $28. But
I'm gonna have to check out the pollo. I mean, I go with the Conti floss,
absolutely,
like everybody else.
Yeah,
does,
absolutely.
Or the steak with the peppercorn sauce.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I try to make sure somebody at my table orders
one of them.
In the shrimp dish, the Diablo.
Yes.
Yeah, unbelievable.
My other favorite is the they do that cheese panea.
Panea, yeah.
Oh.
I get that every time.
Every time.
It's so good.
Oh,
it's so good.
It's so good.
And I love it when my wife goes with me because she doesn't eat it, so I get hers portion too.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. Anything you miss about Mississippi or New Orleans or the South that
So I really love the Texas landscape, wide open spaces. But when I drive back into Mississippi and the pine trees are a lot of Texans feel claustrophobic. But for me, I feel like I'm entering the womb again. It's kind of like,
it's behind the pine curtain.
Yeah, right. So I love that. I love the people.
Yeah. Do you still have a lot of family in Jackson?
No. Really all my family's in Texas now.
No. Yeah.
My dad's deceased. My mom's in Houston.
Yeah.
So, really, really great memories of growing up mostly in Mississippi.
Yeah.
I was born in New Orleans. And so, New Orleans is a great
love
place
the
to visit.
big oak trees with the Spanish moss hanging down.
Oh, yeah.
So gorgeous.
We lived in Biloxi for a while. That's on the Gulf Coast. And that's the Spanish,
that's
the Spanish moss and the oak trees. Yeah.
So amazing. Yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, this was fun, man. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Well, thanks for asking me. It's wonderful. It's an honor.
I appreciate you coming on and wish you nothing but the best. And
I'm
sure our paths will cross again.
Well, I think
shortly.
they will. You're an industrial genius and guru, so we got to do some deals.
We'll do some deals together here soon. Thanks a lot, bud.
Thank you.